I have a great ambition of dying exhausted rather than bored. And that's kind of the motto that I try to live my life by.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Thank you, Rafa, for joining me today. This has been awesome. Rafa Ortiz is an incredible individual, a longtime friend. I think we met back when I was maybe 13. I don't know, a long time ago. He was this young punk Mexican kid that was up in the Ottawa, and it was just a blast hanging out with him. So thanks so much for joining us today, bud.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nick. Yeah, it's been a while, dude. Like, I still remember we actually met at Wilderness Tours. I think you were 14 and I was 15. So it's been a couple decades actually knowing each other. So yeah, man, stoked to be here, man. And that's really cool that you're doing this podcast.
Let's take it back a little bit to the beginning, and maybe not all the way back to the beginning with the Keener days, because we can go on and on with crazy stories, but starting with the Keeners. But let's kind of go back to our first ever big trip together, pretty much right out of high school, right out of the Keener program. We both went and did the Rio Alta Seca, and I had never really, creek boated much. Kind of talk us a little bit through, that whole experience, our first ever expedition together, and just how greenhorned we were, how like brand new into the whole expedition first descent scene and just jumping into it.
Okay, so the year was 2006. Nick and I were both, we're both like play boaters from the Ottawa. We're just kids too. I think we were like 17, 18. And I remember we were doing the World Cup tour. And then in one of the last stops, one of the last stops, we were paddling the Golly. And then I remember meeting this really cool guy at the takeout of the river. And I remember like trying to teach him how to do flat water loops and, play boating. We're just all about it. And then I started chatting with him, and he's super cool. And he's like, yeah, dude, I really want to go to Mexico and paddle this Alta Seca River. It's never been completed. I love doing first descents. I love exploring new rivers. So I was like, dude, my dad actually owns a ranch like right there. We could go stay at my dad's ranch. Like, I'd love to jump in. He's like, yeah, dude, you guys should come. It's like, Nick, let's go to this expedition. Heck yeah. And then guys, I had no clue who he was. Like, when we got back to the cabins that night, I still remember you putting on a DVD and then being like, dude, do you know what we really got ourselves into? And then watching this guy running like 70-foot tall waterfalls, hiking through coca fields in Colombia. And then next scene, we're literally just hanging off a rope, rappelling like 100+ foot waterfalls deep in Veracruz jungle in Mexico. We were play boaters. We had no idea what creeking was. But it was cool because we had what I look at like one of the biggest opportunities I have ever had in my life. Because not often you're able to jump in, from 0 to 100 with one of the best mentors you could ever have. So that guy that we met, the takeout of the Golly, happened to be, one of the best. I mean, I think Ben is probably, the most recognized expedition kayaker or the most accomplished expedition kayaker alive. Little did we know that that's what we were jumping on, to this crazy thing that it would have been crazy to do like just you and I by ourselves, but being able to have that kind of guidance, I think, I don't know, at least for me, it just kind of, it actually propelled my kayaking career from a really frustrating playboating start to the rivers in Mexico, where I'm originally from, or really bad for playboating, to now gaining these skills and this knowledge, but also learning that, that playground is actually one of the best places on the planet to practice it, So those kind of two things together, like not just the power of having an amazing mentor, but also, realizing that my playground was one of the best places in the world for creek boating.
Yeah, and just to fill in for everybody listening that didn't kind of catch what Rafa's saying, this mentor, this guy that, we kind of stumbled upon going on this epic trip is Ben Stokesberry, which again is one of the most renowned expedition paddlers there's ever been. I don't know how many times he's been like National Geographic, adventure of the
and,
year, different things like that.
and detained by rebels.
Oh my gosh, he's been kidnapped more than any other person I know. But yeah, so Ben is definitely an incredible individual. But yeah, it really goes to show that, when we were 17, 18, I think I actually turned 18 on that trip, but it was a bit of this like leap of faith of like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I kind of see what I want to do, and I'm just going to kind of go after it. And a mix between just like fully jumping in headfirst into whatever your goals are, your desires, dreams, any of that kind of stuff. But then also that power of the mentor with it, because I don't know if you remember, but we were in Mexico for maybe 2 weeks or 10 days before Ben arrived. And we did a little bit of our own exploring. We went to like the upper Alsa Seca, and I remember being there with you, and we're like scouting this one little gorge and thinking like, oh yeah, let's just go for it. Like, looks good to go. And again, not really knowing what we're getting into. But then you had like this insight, like, oh, let's just check around the corner, because I do know that there is this like 300 footer around here somewhere. And we almost put in like off this, gorgeous 20 footer, but it led into a walled in canyon with no escape and a 300-foot waterfall exit. So I'm glad that we didn't run that.
Yeah.
But it goes to show, like, if you don't know what you're doing, there's mistakes to be had. And luckily we didn't make any major ones without Ben. But yeah, it was this combination of like just jumping all in, but then also having great guidance as well. Is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's like definitely looking back, it's like, man, if I can figure out how to recreate that, through my life, find myself in that scenario where, I'm able to like have the courage to like jump into like huge tasks, but also be able to have either guidance or proper knowledge. I think it's interesting looking back, because we knew nothing back then, we were just like, young punks, but looking back, it's like, wow, it was like a great formula.
Yeah, I mean, I totally think it was, if not a great formula, the formula for life, where it's like, get a goal, jump all in and be like fully committed, and try to get the best guidance you can along the way. I mean, that's if not the best, that's definitely a great formula for sure, and it could be applied to anything in life. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't matter whether it's expedition paddling.
Yeah. And it's cool. I always find it's kind of cool how the river has taught me so much. I think it's cool because I can also like create cool metaphors in my life related to the river, in so many different aspects. But for this one, for example, like I always kind of relate like challenges to like class 5 rapids or waterfalls, where it's like, I see it, I see the challenge. I know that I want to get from point A to point B. I see point B. I know that it's going to be challenging, but through kayaking, I've learned that, all you got to do is just start somewhere, like learn, get skills, find a mentor, but I find like a lot of people just get stuck with like, not even like just being taken back by fear, and not even being willing to like get into the class 5, and figure it out. I'm not saying it's safe, if you know nothing about kayaking, just getting in a class 5 rapid and hopefully surviving. But I think you do learn that there is a way. Like I truly believe that anything that any human being has accomplished, I can accomplish. Like, I think that we all have pretty much the same brain. I mean, we've all had different experiences, different learning, processes through our childhood and life. But in the end, anything that you can do, I can figure out. I have the same kind of thing in here in my head, right? So, and then how do I do that? I found that just by like exposing myself, beyond fear, just like we do with any big rapid or waterfall. I'm still terrified anytime I'm like above a challenging big waterfall that could potentially, be a life hazard. But, it's not going to stop me from not doing it if I see the possibility, and if I truly believe in, in my skills, and I have a safety plan, and I have, the right people around.
Yeah, I think you touched on something there that's like definitely crucial, and that's one, having all that stuff in place, but two is really having the belief that you can do it. Just to I only know from my experience on that Alsa Seca trip, that very first trip, I had that same thought process 100%. Like if anybody else can do it, I can definitely do it. And if nobody else has done it, then I might try it anyway. But like so for all the listeners out there on this El Seca trip, I had a really close call. Probably one of, if not my closest call to date. And luckily, everything worked out. I swam into a cave and it was looking pretty grim there for a while, but I was able to Spider-Man crawl my way out, and then Phil Boyer rappelled back in to get my boat. And anyway, it was kind of a big ordeal. But up to that point, if any rapid had been run by anybody in our group, I ran the rapid. Like to a fault. Like there was that one slide above the Truchas drop that Ben ran, and he didn't even make it really look that good. But I was like, well, if Ben ran it, then I'm going to go for it too. And again, like, just like there's a horrible mentality of thinking like, oh, just because someone has done it, I can do it. So there's like that fine line of like, yes, I agree that if someone else has done it, then it's certainly possible that I can do it. But I have to also have the belief. Do you know what I mean? Like I have to be able to see the line in my mind's eye. And when I was younger, I was missing that belief part where I was almost just like, oh, well, it's been done, so of course I can do it. Kind of missing that step where I'm like,
you're missing the knowledge.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Consciousness.
And maybe a little bit of the skill.
Yeah. but well, here's, I don't know. I don't want to like open a huge parenthesis, but 6 years ago, I set off on a mission to run Niagara Falls. And it's like the biggest mission, the biggest goal that I've ever set for myself. I pursued it for 3 years, made a movie. You guys should check it out, Chasing Niagara, if you haven't seen it. But anyway, long story short, I'll ruin the end of the movie for you, but I didn't end up running Niagara Falls. I ended up backing out of literally the day before. I canceled the whole project. Huge legal ordeal, big life hazard for sure. It's like 150-foot waterfall that lands like on rocks, basically. Anyway, looking back at the project, I spent 3 years training for this huge goal that in the end I ended up just backing away from. But I did learn that one of the mistakes that I did is that through those 3 years, I actually matured. So if I today, like I'm 33 years old, and I truly believe that Niagara Falls is runnable in a kayak, in a completely professional, successful way. You can work on your skills. You can follow a line and, come out at the bottom completely, unhurt. But I think what I lacked is that I actually matured. I actually grew, so it sounds weird, but what that taught me is that I actually believe that we all have something to learn about that, like 18-year-old kid boldness, that I think there is something to it. I think young punks like that are lacking that like experience, knowledge, all that kind of conservative side, they actually have an edge. Like looking back, like Nick at 18 years old, just firing up any drop that Ben would run, he was up to something. I think eventually if experience comes and experience make sure that we survive. But I truly believe that kind of reckless mentality is also almost like a superpower, right? It's dangerous because like a lot of people don't actually survive it, because if you hadn't come out of that cave, if you didn't have Superman strength on your arms in that moment when you needed it, like you would probably still be in that cave in Mexico. But I think, I don't know. I learned something about that. I truly believe that Niagara Falls will be run by a kayaker successfully in our lifetime. And I think that it's going to have to be a bold kid, that's like negative cloud of all the legal repercussions, all that stuff doesn't weigh. That's what happened to me in the end. Like that weighed more than the light, the point A to point B that I saw. But I don't know. I just wish for myself and for all you guys that, we can find that balance too, because between that young 18-year-old punk boldness and that like knowledge skill combination that will keep us alive.
And I think I agree. And I think that, almost the maybe the hack to that is finding that mentor like a Ben Stokesberry, finding someone to kind of help guide you through that, to share their knowledge and experience with you while you still have that, young boldness, within yourself. And I would say just for all the viewers out there or the listeners out there, I would definitely, precaution people by just saying like,
don't go run Niagara Falls
no, well,
right
not
now,
just
Rafa
that,
said you
but
said.
also like I remember being that 18-year-old, and I remember being, bold for sure. We'll just say bold as like a baseline. But I also still, and I agree 100% that everybody kind of, or at least definitely a lot of young males, go through this like really bold, fearless mentality, especially in that like 18 to 22 year range. But I've also seen the dark side where, people get injured or don't walk out of the cave type thing. And so I consider myself extremely lucky that I was able to have that near death experience and then walk away fairly unscathed. And it taught me that life lesson. And so there's that fine line of like, yes, use that boldness and that fearlessness to chase your dreams and dive in 100%. But also I would recommend finding someone to kind of help bring that experience to the table, because, how's the saying go? It's like, how do you find experience? It's by making like bad decisions or something like that. So, you can only make so many bad decisions before it's really bad.
Yeah.
So if you can find, a mentor or anybody that has that experience, it's just going to propel you so much further, because you can skip the bad experiences, you can skip a lot of the mistakes, but still have that fearlessness and boldness to kind of just 100% dive all in.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not trying to say don't go run Niagara Falls, but
well, just like, I mean, my point too is like, it's definitely interesting, like saying this to an 18-year-old that doesn't really need to hear it,
right.
Like my point is more like, I think that there is like a life lesson like out of this, because it's not just talking, it's like, I'm not actually talking about class 5. Like,
right.
I think it's like, it's something that I've learned that like applies to life. Like the next time you're like you truly believe that you're worth more and you're like about to knock on your boss's office to ask for a raise, it's freaking terrifying. It's easier to not doing it. But sometimes that boldness to like, okay, I believe in, I truly believe in myself, let's freaking do it. Like, let's drop into the class 5. Like same thing, like walking into an exam, I think it's natural to, as human beings, to have fear and to be, to tend to be stopped by fear. But, if we can always kind of, as long as we're supported by skill, knowledge, confidence, to sometimes be able to like break through that fear, and just kind of take a leap into the abyss.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I would say exactly as you're saying, like the older you get, the more experience you get, but with that experience, your boldness usually starts to diminish. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're saying is to try to hold on to that as you get older, as you gain experience, and as you grow as an individual. Just try to keep that like flickering light there. And we were just,
Totally.
Talking about this before the show, and I don't want to go too far into it because it'll take up some time, but I'm looking at buying a rental property right now. And I'm also kind of going through this, like this fear mentality where it's like, oh, there's some things wrong with the property. Do I still go through with it? Is this a good deal? Like, and kind of like, where do I go with it? And that boldness and fear are always kind of battling each other. And I almost find the best way to, or at least the way that I kind of deal with it for the most part, is really to try to like go to a quiet spot and just really try to listen to my gut instinct. Cause that's one thing that I think kayaking has really taught me about everything, one, about running class 5 whitewater, but 2, about just life in general, is that your gut instinct will give you so much information if you just like try to stop and listen to it.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Like I'm just kind of like in my head, I'm like kind of thinking about that amazing Hendri Coetzee quote. I wish I had it in front of me right now. But yeah, but he just talks about that like combination between rational fear and instinct, and I think, wow, like I mean, what you're talking about, I think is something super powerful, super deep, and I truly believe in it. I think it's hard to explain because it's kind of it's irrational, like we're basically like Henry's point is that we learn through society and through like the world as we know it to trust our rational mind, but the reality is that he believes that there's something beyond rational that's an instinct, and if you the art of being able to trust that instinct is really rewarding, but it's not easy. It's not, because often, it's easy to like, A plus A, equals 2 times A, but irrational, that instinct, gut feeling, whatever, you can't, it's not numbers, it's just, it's feeling, right? So but I mean, I don't know if everybody, but I would feel safe saying that I bet each one of us that's listening to this, we've all at some point in our lives found something along that line, something that we don't truly understand, that it's not rational, but that has pushed us to take a decision in a certain direction, and it has actually turned out into a good decision. And looking back, you can't explain why, or what is that? It's not, it's not A plus A. It's, it's something else. But yeah, man, I don't know. It's trippy. Yeah. I don't know if there's like show notes in the podcast, but it'd be cool just putting a link to that Hendri, or just Google Hendri Coetzee blog, his last blog. He basically wrote his blog entry 5 days prior to getting eaten alive by a crocodile, which is one of the most craziest stories that I've ever heard. Actually, Ben Stokesberry was right behind him when that happened, Chris Korbielek. But yeah, it's beautiful. It's like one of the most amazing pieces of writing that I've ever read. I think he reached a point in his life, in his head, to something, about that, talking about that, about, fear, rationality, and gut instinct, and yeah, you should look it up.
I'll definitely look that up, and I'll see if I can find that blog post and put it in the show notes for sure. Yeah, there's definitely something there to that gut instinct though, and I almost feel like you're saying that we all learn from it, like when we trust it and we make a good decision. I think I've equally learned from the bad decisions or the wrong mistakes that I've made from not listening to it. You know what I mean? Where like I get a gut instinct and I'm like, oh, I shouldn't do this. And then I'm like, oh, that's just fear talking. Like I'm going to do it anyway. And then, something goes wrong and I'm like, man, I should have just trusted my gut. I don't know. There's something about trusting that gut instinct for sure.
Yeah.
So Rafa,
anyway,
you've no, you're all good. But you've done all sorts of crazy stuff. You've run like a 50-foot waterfall on fire. You swam over a 70-foot waterfall on an inflatable pool toy lobster. You didn't set the record, but you've run the highest waterfall and the world record waterfall, Palouse Falls. What do you consider, and on top of that, you've gotten married and you've got a daughter now. So of all of these things, and maybe it's not one of these, but what do you consider your wildest adventure?
I don't know, man. Just life in general. Like it's hard for me to pinpoint it down to, one of the above. But I don't know. Again, it's hard to pinpoint it, but I don't know. I truly enjoy challenges. I truly enjoy like coming up with a crazy idea and just kind of proving myself that I can make it happen. And sometimes it's not just, like for example, the fire project. It's not just, grabbing a lighter, putting a bunch of diesel on my body. like that project, for example, took 3 years, and that's a little bit of what I'm like, what I love doing, just like producing things, coming up with crazy ideas and figure out how to make it happen, because there's so many pieces. Like that project, for example, we had to find a professional stunts crew from LA that works in Hollywood, because you want to do it as safe as possible. And it was hard getting there, but yeah, I mean, I think one of the wildest moments, I would probably I mean, if I had to pinpoint it to like a single moment, it would probably be being at the lip of 189-foot Palouse Falls and just realizing that it's a stupid idea, that it was ridiculous and it was way bigger than I've always thought. But I think that kind of tends to happen to me always. You know, I'm always like, I tend to underplay things in my head. I always tend to like, I'm pretty optimistic always, where I'm like, oh yeah, like it'll take 2 days to do that, and then it's like, you know, a week later you're like, oh god, it's still going, you know, or it's like, oh, it'll be fine, it's big, it doesn't look that big from this angle, and then you're at the lip and you're like, whoa, this thing's a beast. But yeah, anyway,
Yeah, I've got
but
that.
definitely like, yeah, sorry, but yeah, I just wanted to like it's cool because you also mentioned like the whole fatherhood and evolving in life, and it's cool because it's kind of like the most like, you know, going from like uncommon, like running huge waterfalls, to the most common thing, like most people go through fatherhood, but it's so cool because I think it is kind of like the most like underestimated like common thing, the most amazing underestimating common thing. Like the moment your daughter is born and like holding her for the first time, it's like millions, well, billions and billions of human beings have gone through that, and it's still like the most insane thing, you know, like to experience it.
Yeah, I regularly relate everything to kayaking, but I always consider like parenthood as running the craziest class 5 walled in gorge that you can't portage and you can't scout. And the only beta that you have on running this long class 5 section is that it's been run before many times successfully. That's it. Like you don't know which way to go. You don't know whether to boof. You don't know whether to stomp it, anything like that. The only thing you know is that it's been done successfully many, many times before you, but there's no scouting. There's no portaging. You're just in it. And I think, I definitely relate so much of life towards kayaking.
I mean, it's cool, man. We have a really cool sport that's kind of unique in that way. Like,
Yeah.
I was chatting to a professional skateboarder yesterday, and it's kind of cool because, like, you know, we're both chatting about life and professional athlete careers and stuff, and it's cool because our analogies are so much cooler. You know, he was legit like, dude, that's a dope analogy. Like, hiking is cool like that, you know, because in the end, life is like a river.
Yeah.
You know, it turns, it goes through steep drops, it settles sometimes, and in the end, it gets from the mountain down to the ocean. It's, I don't know, I'm just getting poetic here, but it's but it's true. I don't know.
No, I've actually, for a while now, I've thought about writing a book about how, you know, life just correlates to kayaking in the river. But so earlier when you were talking about Palouse, you said you got to the lip and you realized that it might be stupid. But but from what I remember, when you ran it, you said you finished it and you wanted to walk right back up and do it again. So tell me about that.
I wanted to walk back up is because it ripped me out of my kayak at the bottom. It's like the most violent force I've ever felt. And I was like, I'm going to do it again, you know? But in the back of my head, I was like, well, you just walked away from, you know, you're actually like, I had a little scratch in my thumb. And I was like, okay, you're actually pretty lucky. Like, not often you get to be like that close up to like, I mean, I wouldn't call it like close up to death, you know, but like that close up to like something as ridiculous as that, you know, like I mean, in the end, it's like the very edge of where humankind is. I mean, and something very specific as like going over huge waterfalls in a little plastic craft, you know, but it's kind of like in my head, it's like, it's kind of cool to be up to that, you know, it's like only one other human being has been right here, you know, like it's kind of amazing in my experience, like to be able to go through something like that, you know, I mean, again, it's kind of, in my head, it's also like, it's kind of irrelevant, but it's cool because for me, it's like, it's my own way to express myself as a human being, you know, and kind of do my little grain of salt to like push the boundaries, you know, because I mean, in the end, it's kind of like, you know, imagine like the first spaceship that went out to space. It's kind of, you know, again, I think kayaking is kind of irrelevant if you compare it to a spaceship, but in the end, like, I bet the feeling is kind of similar, you know, like when Tyler Brad broke that record running Palouse, like, I bet it's the exact same feeling in his head as like, you know, those astronauts, you know, getting in that spaceship, not knowing if they were going to survive or not, but like kind of having to do it for not just for themselves and for their own challenge, but also kind of in the very back of their head, like for humanity. Because it's kind of like, almost like that responsibility that we have as human beings to like push the limits for the species.
Yeah, to push us forward and find out where those limits truly are. Because who knows? Like, I mean, obviously Tyler Bratt set the record with Palouse, but who knows where it'll be in another 10 years or another 20 years or however long. And it's not so much that it's like, oh, this is, the biggest end all waterfall that can ever be done or anything of that. It's just the continual pursuit of finding those limits and just seeing how far we can go, looking for that potential. Right. And essentially potential, in my eyes is continually evolving with whoever, is trying to achieve the potential. And so the higher waterfall you go, or even if you go back to the days of like the, European explorers or the Vikings or anything like that, or the Mayans or whoever, when you're going out and you're just exploring new terrain, new area, all you're trying to do is just be like, but what if? What's out there? Can we do it? Like, can I cross the river? Can I cross the ocean? What's on the other side? And you'll never know until you go.
Until you go.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty cool to think that kayaking, has that same, I don't know if every sport has that same feeling. Like, I don't know if you get that in skateboarding as much. Maybe you do if it's like who can drop the biggest set of stairs or whatever. But
yeah.
Kayaking definitely has that exploratory version, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
So, Raf, what do you consider one of the biggest myths about kayaking and or running waterfalls?
I mean, if I was to think about the biggest myth, I mean, like specifically about running waterfalls, I think one of the biggest myths would be assuming that you just have to go over and it's not hard. I feel like I remember like 18-year-old Rafa with Nick back in the Elsa Seca try to learn how to go over these 40, 50, 60 foot tall waterfalls. And I remember at the start, it was like, I mean, crap, you just make sure that you're not paddling super hard or super slow. And then you just go over and protect your face for impact. And that's it. And I feel like at first that was a little bit my approach, just kind of, just learning that in the end it's water, and there's a couple of things that you got to be really careful of because you don't want to break your back or hurt your legs if you go over. But with the years, I've learned that it's actually an art. Like it actually, to be able to run a waterfall successfully really well is really freaking hard because there's so many variables, because in the end it comes down to that. It comes down to speed coming into the waterfall, which is not an exact science. It comes down to 100% just reading and running. Like you can study it as much as you want from shore, but until you're in it, like until you're in the river, you're not going to be, like even when you're in it, you still have to be making corrections and little adjustments. And in my head, it kind of comes down to experience, having done it like thousands of times, and it's not, I mean, I still don't consider myself a really good waterfall runner. I'm still learning, and you watch guys like Anil, for example, who probably in my head is the single best waterfall runner right now, the most skilled one. And it's cool to watch someone like him just kind of perfect this art, but also he's still learning, So I don't know, back to the point, I think it's an art form. I think, running big waterfalls, it's not just, closing your eyes and praying for the best, but it's actually, a million variables and a million little adjustments, that, put together, make up a beautiful line.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you how many times I've heard, where people say, oh, it doesn't take any skills to run a waterfall. Gravity does all the work for you. And it's correct where it's like, yeah, you're right. To go from the top of the waterfall to the bottom, gravity will bring you there. Do you know what I mean? But to run a waterfall like, smooth or stylish is way different than just going off the waterfall.
Yeah. I mean, here's a little interesting, like mental exercise, right? Like, so like, imagine you're like floating in your kayak. There's this horizon line in front of you. Basically, you're trying to go a little bit faster than the water. I usually try to approach with 45 degrees angle. as I'm getting to the lip, I'm looking, let's say 100 feet down, I'm planning a left stroke, kind of turning my boat back to straight. I'm already looking down. I'm using that stroke to kind of control the transition from flat to vertical, slow as I can. If I do it too fast, I'm going to pull too hard. I'm going to land flat, which I don't want. If I do it too slow, I'm going to create momentum like that, which I don't want because I land on my head. So it's all about feeling that stroke. And in the end, every waterfall is different. You don't know until you're in there, how hard you need to pull on that stroke. When you're done with that stroke, you maybe take another one to kind of lock in your angle, lock it in, and then you're moving your body forward. But you don't want to move it too fast because then you generate momentum like that. You don't want to move it too slow because you don't get to your forward tuck to protect your head before you hit the bottom. So, and all this happens while you're terrified. You're like looking down on this like crazy beast that you're like, wow, this is no place for a human being, and you're like jacked in adrenaline, and it's a beautiful experience, but it's not easy by any means.
Yeah. And I would say on top of that, depending on the size of the waterfall, all of that you just explained happens between 1 and 3 seconds. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, yeah, there's a lot going on there for sure. So
yeah,
Raf, if, some young kid were to come up to you, or anybody, it doesn't matter if it's a young kid or not, what advice would you give for someone that wants to pursue a career like yours, being that you've had great success so far?
Don't do it. I mean, it's kind of funny, but like I have chatted with a bunch of different kids that are like, that look up to me and reach out to me like, yo, I want to do what you did. And the reality is that I consider myself very lucky. Like, looking back at my professional career, there's so many points that are, legit. I was like, we were lucky to meet Ben Stokesberry that day on the Gully. I would not be here where I am right now if it wasn't for that chance to meet that guy and have that conversation at that time in life. I just think that, being a professional athlete, in order to be successful, you have to be part of the 1%. And if you look at the numbers, how likely is it that you are that 1%? I heard about it in a podcast recently of this, it's a very dangerous syndrome when you think that you're better than the rest. It's dangerous to look at something and be like, oh, everybody has failed, but I'm going to succeed. As I've grown older, I've also learned to kind of break with that optimism that I innately have in my nature and just kind of be more realistic about things, and realistically, like, by the numbers, you're not going to succeed at being a professional kayaker. Maybe you do have those very lucky moments and you are. And I mean, I don't want to discourage anyone because someone is going to end up in that 1%, and someone is going to end up being able to live out of, a sport and, have an awesome kayaking career and actually make a living out of one of the most fun things you could ever do. But, if you look at the numbers, I would say, if you're 17, 18 and try to create a professional kayaking career, I would say if you're going to do it, you have to understand that it's not likely and it's going to be freaking hard. And I mean, I also truly believe that there's, no such thing. I just mentioned like lucky moments, but there's also no such thing as luck. Luck is the combination between, I forget that.
Preparation meets opportunity.
There we go. Okay. But, and if you work really hard and do the preparation, eventually opportunity is naturally going to come, even if you have a huge cloud over your head your whole life. It's inevitable, but do understand that it's hard and it's unlikely. As a young kid, you don't believe in the numbers. You don't believe that something unlikely that's going to be your case. If you're not 200% sure that that's what you want, I would say, there's no reason why you couldn't find something that every human being has done and has created a successful path with. And then kayaking, the thing is, like, being a professional kayaker it's a double-edged sword. It also has kind of a negative side to it. It's super fun for sure. And it's a cool freedom path. but it also comes with great responsibility, and it's also there is something to be said about turning your passion into your job. Don't take me wrong, I still love going to the river every day and spending time in my kayak, but there's something that changes the taste of my passion when I'm filming a commercial and I kind of have to run that waterfall. I still love challenging myself, but there's something that changes, that it's tricky, and it's tricky to learn how to go through it, and learn to adapt to it, because I still love running a waterfall, even if it's for a commercial and I kind of have to do it, but it does change something about it.
Yeah. It's funny, as you were saying, like, don't do it, because just knowing myself, if my like 16, 17-year-old version heard you say that, I would have been like, oh dude, I'm so doing it, like, to spite you. like I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to show you for sure. But you're definitely right with the whole passion thing, where I remember when I was really young, like, so I got into kayaking when I think I was like 13. And within 15 minutes, I totally was in love with the sport. Like, this was 100% my calling. And I remember talking to our instructor at the time, James Roddick, and I remember thinking, oh, I love kayaking so much. I would never want to do kayaking as a job, because I wouldn't want to have the job take away from my passion, in the sense that, like, I want to go to work, and if I have a bad day, I could always go back to kayaking. Where if kayaking was my job and I had a bad day, then what do you go back to? Now, that was my mentality when I was 13. As life has gone on, I totally, did that. I turned my passion into my career and into a job. And I never really considered it a job. And maybe that's the difference, is that I was always able to keep the passion there, and still able to keep the passion there, because I don't really think of it that much of as a job. Or on the flip side, if there was a day, that's harder, that I do think like, oh, this is more of a job, I try to always remind myself, this is the coolest job. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Totally.
But there is something for sure where once it becomes like, if you ever consider it a job, there's at least a piece of that passion that starts to, I don't know, crumble a little bit. I think for anybody that wants to keep that passion alive, I guess, is if you want to pursue being a professional in kayaking, or do whatever, or follow your dreams, because everybody says, like, make your passion into your career, which I still 100% believe. But at the same point, don't make it into a job, make it into a career. Maybe that's just the difference there. Do you know what I mean?
Totally. And I would actually kind of like to go back to, because it's kind of interesting, because it kind of comes back to the first thing we were talking about in this podcast, going back to like that boldness that you have when you're 18. And it kind of comes down to that point, right? That like syndrome of like, everybody's failed, but I'm going to do it. In the end, it's like I'm hearing myself, and that's 33-year-old daddy Rafa. That's like I've learned to look at the numbers and like make smarter decisions. But in the end, who's going to be the next professional kayaker that gets to live an incredible life? Well, that one that pushes through the doubt, that one that pushes through that belief of 99% have failed, I'm not going to do it, So, I don't know. I do know that I just discouraged kids to try following this path. But in the end, if you don't try, you don't succeed. So, and I don't know. I think it's, either it's also taught me like it's a formula, that like we were saying earlier, it's like not just the way that we were able to become professional kayakers, but it's also like same formula that will make you successful in life.
Yeah. Ironically, I wouldn't even think that, at first when you were saying like, don't do it, I was like, what? That's the worst advice ever. But ironically, like after just like listening to you, I do agree, because just again, reflecting on what I was thinking, if I was that kid listening, if that doubt is there and you're like, oh man, it's not easy. Oh man, it's not glamorous. Oh man, there isn't a ton of money in it. Maybe I shouldn't do it. You're right. You shouldn't. But if you're that kid that's listening and someone says, oh, don't do it, you can't make it, it's not worth it, and you still feel like, oh, I'm going to show you, then go for it 100%.
Totally. But don't go for it 100%. Go for it 200%, because you have to beat all the other 99% that are going 100%. Like, And I think that's the lesson, you know.
Yeah.
Like
No.
I've learned that like in order to be successful in life, you have to learn to give more than 100%.
Yeah. No, that's great advice for sure. So Rafa, you've done so much already. It's crazy to think you're 33. You've done all these incredible things. You've got a young family now, a beautiful wife. What's next for you? Like, what are your goals now? Where do you see yourself going in 1, 3, 10 years from now?
So I'm definitely like, it's an interesting point in my life right now because definitely, becoming a father, for any of the listeners that has gone through it, you know how there's something that kind of changes in your head, and I think that, on one hand, I love kayaking and I love what I'm doing. I think social media has given us professional athletes an opportunity. It's given us a platform to showcase our creativity. And I'm truly grateful for that. And it's something that I want to keep exploiting, because it's legit awesome and what I love to be doing. On the other hand, I've also kind of started like putting a lot of my efforts into other stuff, you know, away from kayaking. So I have actually, since the last 3 to 4 years, I've kind of actually started like nerding a lot about like investing and just I consider myself a very like financial conscious person. Ever since I'm a kid, I've always like saved money, and then I feel like I spent my 20s learning how to save money, and then once I turned 30, I'm now kind of in this path, kind of like learning now how to invest, and it's something that like I think any smart athlete should go through it, because I mean, kayaking, we're not football players, we don't make like millions of dollars, let's be honest, but anyone that goes through a career like that, you do know that you have to figure something out because there's not many 60-year-old professional kayakers, I mean, how old is EJ?
I think it's like
And he's
55.
not 60. Sorry to throw you under the bus, EJ, but I mean, everyone knows that any professional career has an expiry date. I do believe that social media and the world that we're living is kind of expanding that, and it's allowing us to be able to be productive for longer. But on the other hand, I'm also kind of like getting into this investing world where I'm actually like fascinating. It's like a whole set of new challenges, that like we've talked, like this formula that we've learned in running waterfalls and challenging rapids, like now can apply through that. Like just like you're talking about, rental property that you were looking at. I've actually purchased a storage facility myself this year, and it's one of the scariest things I've done. I look at it just like a huge class 5 rapid, and I'm like, I know that there's an eddy at the bottom, but I know nothing, so now I'm just, reading books, like listening to podcasts, like, just ingesting knowledge, trying to find the mentors, because, on the other hand, I do think that, kayaking and being a professional athlete, it's definitely, there's a way to make a living out of it, but A, it's got an expiration date, and B, it's also in a way limited, and in the end too, like, I have a family now, and I have to find out something, kind of sustainable, because in the end, any day I can make a mistake in one of those waterfalls and, dislocate my shoulder in a bad way that I'm not able to paddle ever again, so I have to be, smart with my financial decisions, and I think that's what changes with fatherhood. It stops being decisions for yourself. You become like, yourself becomes bigger than that. It's not yourself, it's your family. And all of a sudden I believe now that all those decisions that I make, being at the top of Palouse, is not anymore for myself and my own success, but it's beyond that. It's for my family. It's, if anything happens to me in the end, it's not anymore about 18-year-old punk Rafa leaving this planet and leaving his little, little record or whatever, for humanity. But it's like, it's beyond that. It's like, it's my family. Like, there's more to me now. So yeah, investing, real estate, it's cool. It's a cool path right now that I'm like kind of pushing forward to.
That's awesome. I love how you you also, have that same analogy of how like investing in real estate can be the same as that class 5 rapid. And it really all comes down to, having having the desire and that dream and the goal, and then having the kind of fearlessness to jump in, and then also trying to find those mentors like what we were talking about earlier on. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And you know what I was just thinking, like listening to, right, to you, like kind of, making those points. And I think like one of the things that I found that is like a cool part of that formula is some sort of obsession. I think that all professional athletes, we all have that common point that we're all able to obsess over things, and if you can, I truly believe that if you can obsess over something, you are going to be able to beat the crowd, because in the end, you're part of civilization we're part of like billions of human beings, and in the end, it's going to come down to a competition, and like, who's going to succeed? The one that is, it's not luck, in the end, it's hard work. It's obsessing about something and being willing to push through the class 5 till the area at the bottom.
Yeah, no, I didn't think about it before with obsession, but yeah, I mean, when you really look back at it, no matter who it is and no matter what you're looking at, anybody that has ever been successful in anything, whether it's athletics, whether it's, innovation, whether it's technology, whether finance, everybody who's done the best has always been obsessed. So yeah, I never thought about that before, but I think there's definitely.
And I think the word obsessive has like a negative connotation, I think. But in the end, I see it as a blessing. I mean, my biggest struggle is actually more like finding a balance. Like I find that harder, but I believe in like my obsession over things, I think is like, it's like one of my fortes, and I hope that, the listeners can find that obsession within themselves and figure out how to put it to work, because it's a huge skill.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree that like I've got that same obsession with a lot of different things, but I've never really thought of it before as that being part of it, other than the fact that I was just like, oh, I really, 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 really love this. You know what I mean? But I think you're totally right.
And it's a combination, right, between like, passion, and like an obsession in your head. I was just thinking also about like Elon Musk sleeping in his office sometimes, like that's an obsession. Like that guy's probably a really obsessive guy. Why is he the guy like trying to put humans on Mars? Like, like why is he the guy that's probably going to get the first self-driving car like out on the streets? Like it's because of that obsessiveness,
Yeah. I think Steve Jobs, I think, was the same too. Just obsessed with the idea of the iPhone, the iPad, all that kind of stuff. Even back before, Apple was big and all that stuff. He just had that obsession and obsessive personality. And again, like what you said, some people might look at it as a fault. Other people might look at it as a blessing. It all just depends on, the eyes of the beholder.
Yeah. If it's your wife saying it and it's like 10 p.m. and you're still in the office grinding, or it's the guy that's like, I got this email like same day, like it was 10 p.m., but Nick was able to grind through this. Like, I don't know.
I think you're right. I think there's definitely a fine line too of on a total side note that there's something true to be said about the happy wife, happy life thing for sure.
Well, I mean, I don't. I'm going to take it like a step beyond. Like I truly believe that like obsessiveness is like one of my fortes, but taking it beyond in my life, I also understand that it's very dangerous. That like, I mean, I don't know Elon Musk, but I can only assume that. I mean, and you see it like Jeff Bezos just got divorced 2 years ago. I don't know him. Like I'm just assuming things that it's not my job to assume. But in the end, like I do think that it's also dangerous. That I think like a happy life doesn't have to do necessarily with like being number one at something, an ultimate success. For me, like the nirvana, like the step beyond that is like, okay, I can obsess over something and I can crush it. But for me, like a happy life also has to do with like finding the limit without that obsession, finding, like struggling, like pushing, but also being clear about like the struggle to find that balance, to, because for me, success in my life doesn't necessarily have to do with being number one at something. It has to do with something beyond that, in the end. For me, happiness is beyond like being at the bottom of like Palouse Falls, like for me, like happiness right now is, it's more about a balance, and having, a great life where I'm being able to, be free, spend time with my daughters, and, like I'm blessed. Like I love having breakfast, lunch, and dinner every night with my daughter. I'm able to bathe her every night. It's like, those little things for me, that's happiness. Like that's success in my life.
Yeah, I think there's I don't remember where I heard it or exactly where, but I heard that there's essentially four pillars of life. And it for me it's always been a great, balance or like something to look back on to make sure to keep me, in line where you've got four pillars. There's health, wealth, love, and happiness. And the four of those combined essentially creates, in my personal opinion, the best life possible. And you need to focus a little bit on all four of those. And when one of them is, falling, then something's out of line, and you got to spend some more time kind of rebuilding that pillar or whatever, and try to keep, all four pillars as strong as possible. But you're right, whereas obsession can, take away. There's a lot of people that are, obsessed with making money, but they have horrible health. And
Totally.
or horrible, relationships or whatever. And then vice versa. I think there's also a lot of people out there that, people, and I was one of them for sure when I was younger, that I just had no, I didn't believe that wealth was important. I would just give money away for, donations or whatever after having a family and just,
Which is good.
Yeah, which is also
Which
great.
is awesome.
But now just realizing that security also is, I consider wealth part of that security. So,
Totally. Wealth is
I'm not
also
saying,
important.
I'm not saying you need to be, a millionaire, billionaire, anything like that, but you need to have enough wealth that you can, sleep at night and take care of your family and all that kind of stuff. And if you don't, then
Because in my head, what I was just saying about like breakfast, lunch, dinner with my daughter has to do with that. Like why wouldn't like the 99% of the population not be able to do that? Because they have to go to work 9 to 5. And the problem with that is that you give up freedom, you give up time, So I do believe that like wealth, like if you're smart enough, if you figure out the way to make money with your head, not with your hands, you learn that you can actually not have to necessarily trade time for wealth and money. Like,
yeah, and
or be really efficient at trading time for money.
right. And I think another big point, what you're kind of touching on right there, is that wealth isn't just money. Wealth is freedom in a lot of ways, if not in all ways, because
Yeah.
I have thought this through, many times, just as a kayaker, as a professional kayaker, making my, career at this. But not necessarily for anybody out there who doesn't know, it's not like there's a whole lot of money in kayaking to be made, but and I would go through these phases in life where I'm like, oh, I got to make some more money. And then I would stop and I'd think about it a little bit and I'd be like, man, okay, if I made more money, what would I do with it? I would want more money so that I could spend more time with my family and travel more and go kayaking. Wait, I'm already doing that. So why don't I, why don't I just forget that and just continue doing what I'm doing? So there's this like reflection point where it's like, don't just make money to make money. Like figure out what wealth is for you. And for a lot of people out there, if you really stop and think about it and you go deep, it really comes down to freedom. And then when you really start valuing freedom, then it's like, okay, well, what does that freedom look like? How much money do I actually need for that? Or any of that kind of thing. And then it's like, well, maybe I don't need to make millions and billions of dollars. Maybe it's just like, I just need to have, breakfast, lunch, and dinner with my daughter. I just need to be able to, take her for a walk every Saturday or every morning or whatever it is for you. Everybody, it's going to be different for everybody out there. But yeah. I don't know. We're kind of going deep down that.
I know, but I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
I think it's valuable.
For sure. There's definitely, I mean, if you get nothing else out of it, it's good to reflect on yourself and figure out like, okay, what do I want? And also, like what you were saying earlier, back to your Niagara project, you're going to evolve. You know, what you want today might be very different from what you want 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, and all that kind of stuff. Or what you want from today might be different than what you wanted 5 years back. So it's good to always kind of just take moments and reflect on like what's important for you, and assess your current, environment, whether that's, in all of life, whether that's on the river, any of that kind of stuff. It's always good to kind of just like take a step back for a second and be like, okay, what's going on here? What do I need to be doing?
Totally.
Yeah. Okay, Ralph, we're going to continue on, and I'm going to take you to what I call our favorite 5, where I ask each guest these same 5 questions. You ready to rock?
Let's do it.
Okay. What is one mistake that you've made in the past couple of years that has taught you a valuable lesson?
I don't make mistakes. No, I mean, it's hard again to pinpoint it down to like a single mistake, because I truly believe that like, mistakes are what make us learn, as long as we're smart enough. But if I could pinpoint it down to one, I'm going to bring it back to year was probably around 2008. Rafa was young punk. He had just got sponsored by Red Bull, and he had been partying the night before. He was filming a project in Mexico. And the next morning, woke up, drove to this river, stumbled upon a waterfall right next to the road. 10 a.m. We're like scouting this drop, and it was low. It was just stupid. And I watched my friend Kayaker run it, and I saw how he actually kind of scraped off the first part, kind of fell sideways. It's this like 30-foot tall slide that reconnects directly into the 60-foot waterfall slide. This is northern Mexico in San Luis Potosí. The waterfall is called El Meco, and it's one of the toughest waterfalls that you could possibly run. It was too low. Kayaker scraped off sideways on the first one, corrected, managed to come off the second one fine. Hung over, not a lot of sleep. Rafa looks at it. He's like, all right, I'm gonna do better than Kayaker. So I thought that by putting a little bit more left angle, I could correct and not fall off sideways like Kayaker did. But the waterfall was low enough, and by not studying it enough, I ended up spinning out on that first one. That left angle resulted in a 180-degree turn that sent me off backwards, flipped over, rolled up right at the lip of the 60-foot waterfall to find myself sideways above it, and then flip over again as I went over 60 feet, reconnected onto my head on a rock, almost all the way down. And I remember being at the bottom. Like, I remember when I flipped over, I was like, this could be deadly. And then being at the bottom, upside down, my full face helmet actually broke into being upside down, and that was the moment where I almost like pinched myself, like, am I actually dead, or am I alive? Rolled up, and I was fine. That full face helmet actually saved my life. The impact was so big that it broke my helmet in two, but it managed to keep my neck in one piece. And yeah, it's one of the closest calls I've ever had kayaking. And why it was a mistake, because I think I didn't, I was too reckless. I wasn't humble enough. I was, I thought that it was immortal, invincible, new Red Bull athlete. I'm unbeatable. And what I learned is that you can never lose that humbleness. Again, bringing it back to that balance between recklessness and knowledge. I think, that taught me the importance of always, studying things very well. But also, like, it was an interesting day. I also remember after that happened, like, I actually sat in an outlook and looked at the waterfall, and I was like, okay, I'm basically at the point in my life where I'm deciding that I am going to follow this career. And I know that this career can kill me any day. So that's the moment that I kind of told myself and kind of made a pact with myself, where I said, Rafa, if you're going to pursue this career, you're going to accept the fact that it can finish your life early. Any bad mistake and do that. So you have to understand that, and you have to be comfortable with that thought. How are you going to be able to stay alive? Well, by making as good decisions as possible the whole way through, and by never losing focus and humbleness.
Wow. That's pretty deep there, Rafa. It's gonna be hard to follow that one up with this next question. Do you have an inspirational quote that you live by?
I do. And it says, I have a great ambition of dying exhausted rather than bored. And that's kind of the motto that I try to live my life by. I was actually going to tattoo it on my arm at some point, but I don't like the negative connotation of it, that it's like talks about death. But in the end, I think that's kind of how I truly want to live my life. I'm not the guy that wants to just like sit back in a couch, and let life go by. I know that I'm a very ambitious person, and I believe that my success and my happiness comes from that ambition, that I want to make sure that I'm ambitious to my last moment. And I actually had the guy that lives in the house right next to me. He actually passed away at 99 years old last year. And by chatting with him, what I believe was the formula for his being able to be 99 years old and healthy, I think, is because he kept challenging himself till the last moment. You look at, now that I've been getting into the investing path, you look at Warren Buffett, and he's like one of the healthiest 90-year-old men, that keeps himself healthy he still runs the biggest fund, and he still challenges himself through his professional career, even till he's 90 years old, and so that's kind of my motto.
That's awesome. I like how you said you were going to tattoo it on your arm too, because I'm not like big into tattoos, but I've regularly thought about tattooing quotes that I like want to live by on my hand so that I can see them regularly.
Totally.
I've never
remember.
I've never done it, but I've definitely thought
like,
this.
I remember, I think maybe it was you, or maybe it was Dave Newenhouse in the Ottawa that taught us like 20 years ago. He would actually grab his over thruster. We used to use these like plastic like decks that we would put on under our skirt. So when you were doing loops, it would hold the skirt enough volume so you could actually get airborne bigger. And he would put pieces of duct tape and write his goals for the tricks that he was trying to learn there. So every time he sat on his kayak, he would look at them and remind his goals to him.
No, that's actually a great thing too, just to have your goals written anywhere that you're going to see often. Extremely important. Little side note there for sure.
Really?
So next question I got for you is, what are you currently reading, or what is one of your most favorite books?
So, I'm currently reading, but I literally just started yesterday a book called Fooled by Randomness. Can't even tell you much about it because I just started it. But you would be bored. The general audience will be really bored to see my book list. Like I said before, I'm a very obsessive human being. So, over the past couple of years, I've been really obsessed with, I started actually with like stocks and, companies and that kind of stuff, like Warren Buffett, that kind of stuff. So what I usually do is that I obsess over something and I just ingest knowledge. Last year I read 34 books, and most of them are would put you to sleep for sure. But yeah, it's hard to choose like a single book, but I don't know, one of the last books that I read that like really kind of made a difference in my life is the negotiating book,
The Never Split the Difference.
Never Split the Difference. Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good one. But I really like reading for growing. I don't really read for entertainment. And that's one of the things that I've also kind of learned in the last couple of years of my life. Like, if I can really be like, if I have a goal, if I have a challenge, and, again, we're bringing it back to like that boldness combined with knowledge. And I've found books and also actually podcasts as a way to gain that knowledge. So if I can use that obsession as a tool, but I can actually start using that to consume knowledge and really kind of stack up this one side of the equation, combined with that boldness and just going for it, I think that that's a good path for success. That, I can't tell you if it's going to work because I'm in the middle of the path, but it's feeling good so far.
No, I think there's definitely something for sure with just trying to be a continuous learner and that obsession too, just whatever you're into, go all in. I think it's Tony Robbins talks about it in a different way, but that same obsession where he says, if you want to take the island, burn your ships, meaning like if you're gonna go and attack something, cut off all of your options for retreat, and just go all in. Yeah. What do you consider one of your most awesome memories or moments in life?
Again, it's so hard to pinpoint to single moments, but I'll just like name a few. The moment that I got to the bottom of Big Banana Falls in my kayaking career, that's probably like one of my highest points because it's a waterfall that I ran first. It was my first descent. It was the second highest waterfall run. I think still, or is Dane's higher? No, I think it's still the second. Was Dane's higher? The one he ran in Chile?
I think Dane said it was higher, but I'd have to go back and look at the
Okay.
numbers.
It doesn't matter. But for me, like that moment for me, like looking back at, something that I've been pursuing for 3 years, training super hard, like that's, definitely a huge moment. So another huge moment was like actually recently where I purchased my first real estate investment earlier this year. And the moment that I received my first like passive income check, it kind of feels good. It's kind of cool. It's like, wow, that's like, there's eddies in this class 5, and there's light on the other side of that class 5. That's kind of professionally. Marrying my wife, 4 years ago. That's like, I'm super grateful and blessed to, have found such a great woman to share my life with. Also, moment that my daughter was born. Yeah, again, it's hard to pinpoint it down like that, but
No, for sure. I think anybody who's, a parent, it's hard pressed to not have the birth of their children as one of their, greatest memories of life or moments of life for sure. So our last one here of our favorite 5 for you, Raf. If you could go back in time to any age and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
I think it would be more like, I was going to say more like, dude, like stick to it, like stick to that obsession, kind of remind myself back there. Cause there's also things that I have started, with that obsession I have quit, along the way. But yeah, I think it's something like that, kind of like stick through it. I think it's also like a lot of failures and different quests that I've also kind of tried to follow. I've also like taught me things, and I don't think they're negative in a way, because I think like it's not failure as long as you learn from it, but I do think that, and then I think also a huge lesson is like, telling yourself. I think when I was very young, I used to always think very short term, like I want to do this and I want to get it done by tomorrow. If I can go back in time and remind myself that it's not a race, it's a marathon. And actually my buddy Paige, he said something to me a few years ago, and he said, I like to not think about, he's an amazing film, camera operator and director. And he told me, like, I don't think about things as 1 year goals or projects. I try to push myself to think of things as like 5-year things or 10-year things, don't think about anything as a 1 year quest, but think about things as like a 5-year like thing, because if you're only trying to accomplish like little goals, it's harder to, achieve greatness than if you like really kind of think about more on like the 5-year kind of time range.
Oh, that's awesome. I definitely need to do that myself, probably a little bit more, is think beyond the 1 year, the 12 months, whatever, and kind of look into, more of that 10-year. There's another quote that goes something like you underestimate how much, no, you overestimate how much you can do in a year, and you underestimate greatly how much you can do in a decade. And it really is exactly what you're saying. Like, don't get too caught up on just the 1 year. but think of almost that 10-year as the whole package a little bit more.
Totally.
Raf, thank you so much for coming on. I've got one final question here for you. And what is your definition of awesome?
My definition of awesome is probably that like peak performance point, like that combination of like preparation, knowledge, studying, working up your skills combined with, that boldness, that, breaking over fear and just doing it, like that combination that, in that moment where you combine both and you could, look back at the beast, be the huge waterfall or be that meeting with your boss that went successfully and looking back and being like, cool. I just kind of, tapped into that formula and it worked, and yeah, for me, that's kind of the definition of awesome.
That is awesome. Dude, thank you so very much for taking some time out today and talking with me. It's always a pleasure anytime we get together and hang out and get to talk. So I was stoked either way. And I think the listeners are going to be stoked as well because you definitely dropped some bombs in there as we went deep into some philosophical concepts for sure. But there's definitely lots of little golden nuggets of value within that whole podcast. So it might be worth for some of you guys to go back and listen to it again. I might do that myself. Anyway, what's the best way, Raf, for some of our listeners to continue to connect with you after this?
It's definitely Instagram. That's kind of my main platform. Rafa Ortiz kayak. Yeah, give me a follow, send me a DM. I love connecting with people. I try to always, when someone, comments or tries to interact with me, sends me messages, I always make a point to connect with people, to reply. Yeah. And any questions you might have, just, shoot me a message there. I'm always trying to be active on there.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you all of our listeners for tuning in today. This was an amazing episode with Rafa. Again, thank you so much, Raf, for taking your time out today. And if any of you guys found any value in this episode, which I certainly hope you did, please share it with somebody. Please help us grow this community, grow our message. And if you guys haven't done so already, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast as that continues to help us get, the proper ratings on iTunes and Spotify and all that stuff. And it just helps us grow our mission as well. So yeah, thanks for everybody for all you're doing to help us. And thank you, Rafa.
Yeah, thank you, Nick.
And let's all go and have an awesome day. Cheers.